The first no one else did. For weeks, Shaniqua searched the city alone. She posted flyers, knocked on doors, and traced every lead, every whisper. Each dead end felt like a brick on her chest. And then came the phone call that changed everything. The voice was disguised, but the message was clear. Malik had been taken. They were holding him somewhere in the industrial district, where the warehouses sat like tombstones under the gray sky. And they warned her any police involvement would be fatal. Shaniqua's blood ran cold, but fear had never been her master. She called her childhood friend, Jamal, a skilled hacker with a mind like a steel trap. Together they began piecing together clues, following digital breadcrumbs that led to a shocking revelation. Malik had stumbled onto a human trafficking ring linked to a local councilman, a man whose wealth and influence shielded him from the law. Every step they took was dangerous. Every night shadows followed them, eyes peering from dark corners. But Shaniqua's determination grew fiercer. She couldn't let her brother or the countless victims trapped in that dark network disappear into oblivion. Then came the twist that shook her to the core. The councilman had been mocking her missing person report in private circles, unaware that she was closer than ever to exposing him. Every laugh, every slight, every dismissive smirk, Shaniqua remembered it all as she prepared to turn the tables. On the night they struck, Jamal's hacking had uncovered the location of a warehouse where Malik was being held. Shaniqua called the few trusted allies she had, people who knew the stakes and the danger. Under the veil of darkness, they approached the facility. Inside, Malik was chained, bruised, but alive. His eyes widened when he saw Shaniqua. "Shan," he whispered, disbelief and relief mixing in his voice. Shaniqua didn't waste words. With precision, they freed Malik, capturing security footage of the operation, every illegal transaction, every face involved. The councilman, smug and untouchable until now, was about to see the wrath of someone he underestimated. The next morning, Shaniqua walked into the precinct again. This time, she didn't tremble. She had proof, undeniable evidence. She handed it to the same officer who had laughed at her weeks ago. "This is for Malik," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. "And for every person you ignored because you thought their lives didn't matter." The officer's eyes widened as he scanned the documents, the video files. His smirk dissolved into shock. Justice, long delayed, was finally arriving, and Shaniqua was its herald. But just as she thought the nightmare was over, Jamal intercepted a message on his encrypted line. The councilman was not just a player in the human trafficking ring. He had connections far beyond the city, reaching powerful figures who would stop at nothing to silence anyone who exposed them. Shaniqua's phone buzzed with another message. It was short, simple, but terrifying. "You think you've won. You haven't seen the worst yet. We're coming for you." Her stomach dropped. They had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. Shaniqua looked at Malik, at Jamal, at the evidence in her hands, and felt a cold determination settle over her. They thought they could underestimate her. They thought she was alone. They thought justice would be silenced. They were wrong. And as the sun dipped below the skyline, Shaniqua knew one thing for certain. The next move would be deadly. Shaniqua had never felt fear like this. The warning on her phone burned in her mind like a brand. "We're coming for you." The councilman she had exposed wasn't just a city-level criminal. He was a spider at the center of a web that stretched far beyond her city, beyond anything she had imagined. Malik sat on the couch, still weak from his ordeal, but his eyes were sharp. "Sean, they're not bluffing," he said quietly. "This isn't just about me anymore. They're going after anyone who stands in their way." Shaniqua's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "Then we fight smarter, not just harder." She and Jamal dove into research, combing through every link, every connection, every past scandal tied to the councilman. What they uncovered chilled them. Offshore accounts, shell companies, corrupt law enforcement officials, even ties to a private security force that answered only to the councilman. They were dealing with a network that had built its immunity on fear and silence. The first strike came at 2 a.m. A black SUV idled outside Shaniqua's apartment. Jamal spotted it through the security camera feed. "They're watching," he muttered, voice low. "Probably more than one car." Shaniqua grabbed Malik, ushering him into the apartment's secret safe room, a small reinforced space they had installed after freeing him. Her heart pounded like a war drum. Every instinct screamed danger, but she couldn't freeze. They had to stay 2 steps ahead. Hours passed. Silence returned, heavy and oppressive. By dawn, Shaniqua was running on adrenaline and worry. She knew they couldn't hide forever. The councilman's reach was too vast. The only way forward was to strike decisively. Her plan was audacious. Using Jamal's hacking skills, they intercepted a shipment linked to the councilman's network, a shipment rumored to carry critical evidence and cash meant to finance more abductions. If they could secure it, they would have leverage strong enough to force allies to turn against him. The night of the operation, Shaniqua felt a strange calm. Every heartbeat was synchronized with the steps of her carefully assembled team. They moved silently through the abandoned warehouse district. Shadows danced in the dim light of street lamps. They reached the shipment. But just as Jamal began decrypting the locks, the warehouse door banged open. Armed men flooded in, their faces hidden behind masks, guns raised. Shaniqua's breath caught. "Drop it!" a voice hissed. It wasn't just the men, they had someone else. Someone she didn't expect. Her stomach dropped. The councilman's personal enforcer, a former police officer, stepped forward. His presence radiated menace. "You think you can play hero and win?" he snarled. "This ends tonight." A firefight erupted, the echo of gunshots bouncing off the walls. Shaniqua ducked behind crates. Malik huddled beside her, Jamal shouting commands. Somehow they managed to grab the shipment and escape into the labyrinth of alleys, but it became clear. The councilman's forces were relentless. He had eyes everywhere. Hours later, hiding in a safe house, they opened the shipment. Inside, among the stacks of cash and ledgers, was a file that made Shaniqua's blood run cold. Photos of her and Malik, taken at various locations, seemingly tracking their every move. "Shan? They've been following us all along," Malik whispered, voice trembling. Shaniqua clenched her fists. The councilman hadn't just underestimated her once, he had underestimated the consequences of her resolve. And now, she realized the horrifying truth. The councilman knew more than she thought. He wasn't just powerful, he was anticipating her moves, staying several steps ahead. Then Jamal's phone buzzed. It was an anonymous message, no return number. "You think you're untouchable. You're already inside our trap. The next move is ours." Shaniqua stared at the screen, her chest tightening. The walls of the safe house suddenly felt fragile, like paper in the wind. Every ally she had trusted could now be compromised. Every street they walked could be their last. She looked at Malik. "We thought we were fighting him, but maybe he's been fighting us the whole time." A shadow passed the window. Too quick to be certain, but deliberate. Shaniqua's breath hitched. The councilman's reach had found them again, closer than ever. And then, from the darkness, a single cold laugh echoed through the streets. A laugh she knew all too well. The war wasn't just looming. It had already begun. The safe house had become a cage. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of a car outside felt like a threat. Shaniqua sat at the edge of the couch, a pistol clutched tight in her trembling hands. "Shan, we can't keep running." Malik said, his voice hoarse but steady. "We need to take this fight to him." Jamal nodded, tapping furiously at his laptop. "I've been tracing their surveillance. They've got a mole someone feeding them info about us. That's how they're always one step ahead." Shaniqua's heart sank. A mole. The word echoed like a death sentence. It meant someone close, someone they trusted, had already betrayed them. Hours later, Jamal cracked into a hidden server. Files spilled across his screen. Addresses, schedules, names. And then Shaniqua's chest tightened. There it was. A dossier labeled Operation Shaniqua. Her entire life mapped out in detail. Photos of her childhood home. Conversations recorded. Bank statements. Even her late mother's funeral listed in cold, sterile notes. "God," Malik whispered. "They've been watching us for years." Before they could react, the lights in the safe house flickered. Then darkness, Jamal cursed, scrambling with the backup generator. Shaniqua's instincts screamed danger. She grabbed Malik, moving toward the back exit. But then came the sound, the heavy crunch of boots on gravel outside. Not one pair. Dozens. "Shaniqua," a voice called from beyond the door. Smooth, mocking. "The Councilman. You've been entertaining. I'll give you that. But this game ends tonight." Gunfire ripped through the walls. Shaniqua dove for cover, dragging Malik with her. Jamal returned fire from the window, the crack of bullets shaking the air. The smell of smoke and gunpowder filled the room. "Basement, go!" Jamal shouted. They scrambled down into the narrow basement, lungs burning. Shaniqua's mind raced. They couldn't hold out. Not like this, unless the shipment files had something they could use. She yanked the folder from her bag, flipping through the pages by flashlight. And then she saw it, a list of payments, bribes. One name stood out, a name that shattered her world. Jamal. Her blood turned to ice. She looked up at him. He froze, eyes wide, gun still in his hand. "Shan, listen, it's not what it looks like," Jamal stammered. But the pieces clicked. The near misses, the sudden ambushes, the fact that the Councilman always seemed to know their location. He hadn't been their shield. He had been their Judas. "Tell me you didn't," Shaniqua whispered, her voice trembling with rage. Jamal's face twisted with guilt. "I didn't have a choice. They had dirt on my prison time worse. I thought I could protect you while playing both sides. You sold us out." Malik spat, his voice raw with betrayal. The pounding on the door above grew louder. Time was running out. Shaniqua raised her gun, her hand shaking. Jamal raised his too, eyes wet with tears. "Shan, please, if you shoot me, you'll never make it out alive. I'm the only one who knows their system, their codes. Without me, you're blind." Shaniqua's finger hovered over the trigger. Rage and survival warred in her chest. Jamal, her childhood friend, the one who had helped her free Malik, had also been the reason they were trapped in this endless nightmare. Malik coughed, weak but defiant. "Don't trust him, Shan. Not again." The door upstairs burst open. Heavy boots thundered down. Voices barked commands. Time had run out. Jamal's eyes locked on hers. "Decide, Shan, right now. Do I die here or do I help you bring him down?" The Councilman's men were seconds away. The air was thick with smoke, betrayal, and blood. Shaniqua gritted her teeth, gun aimed squarely at Jamal. She knew one choice would destroy her trust forever. The other might destroy them all. She exhaled slowly, and then the basement pulsed with chaos, the Councilman's men storming in from above. Malik gasping for breath beside her, and Jamal standing in front of Shaniqua with his gun raised, begging for mercy. For a heartbeat, time froze. Shaniqua's finger tightened on the trigger. Betrayal burned in her veins, but so did a ruthless clarity. Killing Jamal here would only make them weaker. She lowered the gun slightly, her voice like steel. "Fine, you get one chance. But if you cross me again, Jamal, I'll pull this trigger myself." Jamal's shoulders sagged with relief. "You won't regret this." Shaniqua wasn't so sure. The Councilman's enforcers poured into the basement. Gunfire exploded in the tight space, the walls shaking with every blast. Shaniqua fired back, dragging Malik toward the hidden tunnel she and Jamal had built weeks earlier, a tunnel meant as a last resort. Smoke filled the room as they crawled through, bullets ricocheting around them. At the far end, they emerged into the night air of an abandoned rail yard. Sirens wailed in the distance. The city was waking up to a war it had ignored for too long. Shaniqua wiped the blood from her cheek, looking at Malik and Jamal. No more running. Tonight it ends. Using Jamal's access codes, they infiltrated the councilman's private estate. It was a palace of corruption, marble floors built on blood money, walls lined with the faces of politicians who owed him their silence. Jamal whispered, "Server rooms in the East Wing, that's where he keeps the backups. If we dump everything to the press, there's no burying it." Shaniqua led the charge, her heart pounding. They fought their way past guards, every corner a gauntlet. Malik, though weak, refused to sit back. He fired with trembling hands, each bullet fueled by weeks of captivity. Finally, they reached the councilman's inner sanctum, and there he was, the man who had laughed at her pain. The man who had dismissed Malik's life as worthless. The man whose shadow had smothered the city. He stood calm, suit crisp, a glass of brandy in his hand. "Well," the councilman drawled, the girl who thought she mattered. "Do you really think you can bring me down? I am the law in this city." Shaniqua stepped forward, gun steady. "No, you're the rot. And tonight the city learns the truth." He smirked, raising his hand. From the shadows, more guards emerged, weapons trained on them. Shaniqua's stomach sank. Outnumbered. Again. But then the sound of sirens. Real ones. Police cars screeched outside, lights flashing. And not the councilman's men, but federal agents in tactical gear storming the estate. The councilman's smirk faltered. "You thought you owned the system," Shaniqua said, voice rising. "But I leaked everything hours ago. Every file, every payment, every name. By the time we got here, the press and the feds already knew." "You're finished!" The councilman lunged for a hidden gun, but Malik fired first. The bullet struck his arm, sending the weapon clattering across the marble. He collapsed, howling, as agents swarmed and dragged him away. For the first time in weeks, Shaniqua felt the crushing weight of fear lift. Justice had arrived. In the days that followed, the councilman's empire crumbled. Politicians resigned in disgrace. Victims of the trafficking ring were rescued and given voices they had been denied. And for the first time, the city looked at Shaniqua not as a desperate woman, but as a warrior who refused to be silenced. Jamal, though forgiven in the heat of battle, was later taken into custody. His betrayal had cost too much. Shaniqua visited him once, through the cold glass of a jail booth. "You had a choice," she said softly, "and you chose fear." Jamal lowered his head. "I thought I could play both sides, but you actually believed in something." Shaniqua walked away, tears stinging her eyes. Not all victories were clean. On the courthouse steps, Malik stood beside her, his arm in a sling, but his smile unbroken. "You did it, Shan. You made them listen." She shook her head. "We did it. And we'll keep fighting for everyone they tried to erase." The cameras flashed. The city finally saw her not as a victim, but as a force. As the councilman was led away in chains, he caught her gaze and sneered through bloodied lips. "This isn't over. You have no idea how deep it goes." Shaniqua met his stare without flinching. "Then let it come. I'm ready." That night, back in her apartment, Shaniqua finally allowed herself to breathe. Malik slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. But as she poured herself a glass of water, her phone buzzed. A single message. No number. Just 3 words. "Phase 2 begins." Her hand trembled. The fight wasn't over. The councilman had been a symptom. The disease was bigger, darker, and still alive.